We're good, Amanda. Okay. Welcome and thanks for joining us. We're so excited to bring you this call. Feather and I were brainstorming a couple months ago on what we wanted to educate on next and came up with a, hit a home run, maybe they'll say yes type idea. And we're so excited that she said yes because we're excited to share this with you. But tonight we have Liza or Liza? I always get it wrong. Which way are we saying it? I can't hear you, Feather.
It's Liza.
Liza. Okay. I know I always get it wrong. So I wanted somebody to correct me because I wanted to make sure I said it right. And I apologize. So Liza Pepple graduated with a degree in chemical engineering from Clemson University in 2002. After working as a plant engineer and nutritional ingredients manager for a large agribusiness company, she came to work at Juice Plus as the quality manager in 2008. She became director of global product development shortly after and has been diligently working on continually improving the Juice Plus products along with her team. And she's committed to continuing to build the most nutritious, highest quality products based on plants. Her passion for agriculture and knowledge of nutritional ingredient manufacturing has made this production more than just a job. It's her true calling. And she just told us that she truly loves her job and what she does. So we're excited that she's here to share with us.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining on this Thursday evening here. So they actually asked me to talk a bit about the farms and the farmers because, it's kind of this agricultural month thing. So I think it kind of ties in really nicely here in August. So I will just get started. I love to just talk about our farms because it really is kind of my passion. So a little bit of my background to give you a little bit more of an understanding of why I think this is really a calling is because not only have I been in the nutritional and
Hey guys, we're gonna
sharecropping farmer. Am I back now?
You're back.
Okay. I think in Memphis, the problem is that AT&T is having a major issue with their internet service here. And I thought that they had overcome it, but perhaps they haven't. So I'm actually going to go off screen, if that's okay, to try and stabilize a little bit more. So you get to see this lovely picture of me where I look like I'm about to take a deep breath. But anyway, let's try it this way. So I'll start again. I was just sharing that, my family is actually part of this whole agricultural and manufacturing adventure that I've been on for my whole life. So my dad actually escaped from Hungary during the revolution in 1956. But while he was living there until he was 16 years old, his family were sharecroppers under the communist regime. So he worked agriculture, he worked in the fields the entire time. And when he came to the United States, he actually got his degree in chemical engineering as well. And what's interesting about that is that one of the main things that he worked on was developing a process to manufacture natural vitamin E from oils like corn or soy oil, sunflower oil, through a process called molecular distillation. And he's still one of the world's experts in molecular distillation. But I also got my degree in chemical engineering. My mom, by the way, her family also was in agriculture. They grew their own food. They were mostly just poor Southerners that grew their own food so that they could can and eat it. But she actually worked as an industrial engineer. My brother is actually a civil engineer. So, family conversations, I'm sure you guys would think are incredibly stimulating. All the engineer talk at our dinner table all of our lives has been great. But the interesting thing is that while my dad, after I graduated from high school, when I was in college, my dad actually started to work for an agricultural company, and they hired him to build a natural vitamin E plant. And so he was building this natural vitamin E plant. My brother was also in college and home for the summer. And he worked as a contractor on the manufacture, on the build site. So he put in all of the iron. He was an iron worker. So he put in all of the, iron bars and grates and railings in the manufacturing facility. And then when I graduated with my degree in chemical engineering, actually worked as an engineer in that plant. And now today we actually buy our vitamin E from that same plant. So, this has kind of been a holistic kind of family affair when it comes to agriculture and manufacturing. But it's really given me the ability to focus myself on both the agricultural side. And growing up, we still farmed. We still had, several acres of farmland that we grew crops. My dad still loves to get his hands in the dirt. He right now has over 300 Hungarian pepper plants on his deck. It is just him and my mother. What they're going to do with the crops of 300 pepper plants, I still don't know, but they will find something to do with them. But it allowed me to really kind of be able to understand nutrition and how food fed us. My family growing up was really focused on making our own food. My mother made dinner every night, and half of our plate was vegetables, and we had fruit for dessert. And there was never a time during the summer where we didn't have a plate full of cantaloupe and tomatoes on the table, just as our sides. And this was just part of life. And when my dad would go away on work trips, my mom would allow us to have, kind of our special dinners. And what my brother and I wanted more than anything was processed food, because we never, ever got it. We wanted, TV dinners, or we wanted McDonald's, because we never got that stuff growing up. And that allowed me to really, as I got older, understand the value in home cooked meals and understanding where the nutrients are coming from the fields. And growing up being an athlete, I was not sick. My family wasn't sick as much as my friends' families were. And as I got older, I was attributing that to the fact that we were eating better. We were eating more nutritious food, and we were really taking care with it. So as I became an engineer and understood the ability to be able to concentrate that nutrition and to be able to utilize the nutrients from plants to more easily supplement the diets of most Americans, it really did become an absolute calling for me. And coming to work at Juice Plus and being able to take all of that learning and all of that understanding and put it together has been really, really special. So when I started at Juice Plus, we had great relationships through our manufacturers with all of our ingredient suppliers and our farmers, but we really hadn't understood, because there wasn't anybody in the company who really kind of had that background. So we really hadn't understood how important they were and the amazing things that they were doing. So almost as soon as I got here, I started visiting the farms and speaking to our growers and that they do, and working with our manufacturing partners, the people who dry the produce or freeze the produce, and then the people who put it all together, to be able to really make sure that we had everything buttoned up. And the good news is they were already doing it. We were already working with amazing growers and amazing manufacturers, and they knew what the best things were. But I was able to really get in there, dig in there with them, showcase some of the up and coming technologies, and making sure that we were on the cutting edge of technology. So making sure that we were connecting farmers with universities within their region so that they could get their soil tested and ensure that they were doing the right things for the soil to keep it nutritious, that they were doing crop rotation the best way so that they could plant crops that would feed the soil as much as they would take nutrients from the soil. And that's something I'm not sure a lot of people really understand about agriculture, is that while plants do take nutrients from the soil, they also deposit nutrients into the soil. So by rotating your crops on an annual basis, you're actually able to create the nutrition that you need so that the next you plant has that already there without having to add chemical fertilizers onto soil. And we work with people who really understand the basics of farming and understand how to do it right. Understand that organic principles in farming are the best way to farm, so that you're not putting chemicals on the soil. Because once you start putting chemicals on your soil, then you are really, and what I mean by chemicals, all things can be called chemicals. Water is a chemical, but what I mean are, kind of the natural chemicals that you would find, like synthetic fertilizers or non-organic pesticides. These are the things I'm talking about when I say chemicals. But when you put those on your soil, it's not just affecting the crop that's there today. It's affecting any of the water runoff, and wherever that water runs off to, it's affecting the next generation of crops. And that goes for GMOs as well. Once you plant genetically modified organisms in your ground, it takes you a long time to be able to plant something that will be certified as non-GMO. So all of the growers that we work with only plant non-GMO crops. And the good news is that we only purchase a few crops that have ever been genetically modified. I think that's something that people don't always realize, is that there's only, I think it's 11 crops right now that have ever been genetically modified. So not everything is GMO. So right now it's only apples, soy, other kind of rice. Those are the things that have been genetically modified. Sorry, I just saw a chat message that threw me a little bit. There is such a thing as organic pesticides, just so you know. That is absolutely a thing. There are pesticides that are allowed to be put onto organic produce. It is a thing. So organic doesn't necessarily mean pesticide free. And that's actually a great way to talk about our produce, because what people really look for when they look for organic certifications on things is they want to ensure safety. Am I right? Give me a clap, or give me something in the chat to tell me you're with me on this, since you can't see me. So hopefully I'm I'm with you guys. But that's really what we're looking for, is safety, right? And one of the things that we have to understand is that certified organic produce is essentially just a paper trail. It's just something that states that on paper, all of this stuff has been, doesn't necessarily mean less chemicals. It means slightly different chemicals. So what we look for when we plant, when Juice Plus is looking for growers that are planting with us, is we're looking for people who are doing the right things for the soil. So we use organic principles, but we do them in the right way. So one of the stories I always like to tell is the fact that organic produce is often recalled due to microbiological contaminants. So if you see produce being recalled for things like salmonella, E. coli, listeria, these are things that can actually kill humans, and they are more prevalent in organic produce than they are in conventional produce, a lot of times because the fertilizers that are used in organic produce are actually really great growing grounds for these microbiological contaminants. So if you don't treat the fertilizer properly, then you are going to increase the chance that you have these organic microorganisms growing. Now, the way that you go around is by understanding exactly how to treat the fertilizers. And so you can have an organic farm that's like a newer organic farm where the farmer doesn't really understand all of the things that have to go into growing in order to make it safe and healthy. And that's one of the things that I love about being able to connect directly with our farmers, is that I get to go and I get to see what they're doing. They are experienced. We have been working with these growers for over 20 years. Many of them are second, third, even seventh generation farmers. So these people have been around farming forever. They know how to treat the fertilizers, the organic fertilizers, which are things like compost and manure. They know how to treat them so that they are not going to create additional challenges to their fields or the produce that's grown in their fields. And that to me is really the difference in being a paper trail versus being actually in the farms, in the fields with our farmers, knowing what they put on their fields. It's more than just a paper trail. We also have third-party certification. So we have third parties like NSF who certify things like, basically they certify three things. They certify that what we say is in our product is actually there. So we can't put something on our label that we don't actually put into our product. And then they make sure that everything that's in our is labeled so that we can't put something in our product that we don't tell you about. And they certify that there are no harmful levels of any contaminant in our products. So they look for heavy metals, they look for pesticides, and they look for microbiological contaminants, they look for PHAs and other kind of cancer-causing components. And they make sure that there are no harmful levels of any of that in our produce. So you can be very, very comfortable understanding that we are working directly with our growers. I specifically am working directly with our growers to ensure that I know everything that they're putting on their farms. They know our principles, they know our ethics, they know everything that we look for in produce, and they deliver. And they consistently deliver. And that it's not just me telling you this, it's a third party certifying that what we say is actually being done in every single batch of our product. So that's really, from the farming side of things, that's what I really love. Those are the things that really get me excited about our the start of our process. But just a little bit more about how things work as it goes through. So once we grow this amazing produce, we can't spend all of this time growing this amazing produce and then treat it, like crap. We want to make sure that we treat it just as well through the rest of the process. And what that means is that we do take it out of the fields, clean it, and within hours, we put it through a process called IQF, or individual quick freezing. And this process really locks in the nutrients. So one of the other things I like to remind people of is that while there's a lot of research that's been done on the nutritional levels of produce today versus like 50 years ago, there are really two things that go into that. The first is that there is some soil degradation. Mostly when they're doing those evaluations of soil degradation, they are not distinguishing between soil that is growing things for food and soil that is growing things for industrial practices. So when you're growing for industrial things, so if you're growing corn, for example, for biofuels, the nutrient levels really don't matter. The soil nutrient levels really don't matter. So people have been less cautious about that. But those are not used for food. Now, when you grow for food, largely the nutrient levels in the soil that's being grown for food has remained relatively stable. The nutrients in the produce at the grocery store, not, however. And the main reason for that is that if you think back 50 years ago, now I know not everybody was alive 50 years ago, but if you think back to what your grandparents did, oftentimes they would grow their own produce, or they would buy produce from a grower that was in their location, so less than 10 miles away from them. And they were picking that produce up daily or they were freezing it themselves. So the nutrient content back then had more to do with the fact that it was so fresh. And when you pull produce from its source of nutrients, from its, from the earth, it starts to degrade as soon as you pick it. So right now we are picking produce and it's sitting in trucks being shipped and in boats being shipped, and it sits on grocery store shelves, and it sits in your pantry or your refrigerator, and it's goes months sometimes between when it's picked and when it is actually consumed. So the amount of nutrients that are left in that time frame is much lower than it was when we were picking our produce and eating it that same day. So I see Lisa M in the picture there has a lovely tower garden in her picture. And my suggestion is if you have the capability and if you're interested, getting one of those tower gardens and being able to grow your own produce really year round, because we have those lights that are on there. You can grow inside year round, and the produce that you eat will be so much more nutritious and even tastier than what you can buy at the store, because it's so close to its nutritional sources. But the way that we overcome that with our produce that we have is that we freeze it. Freezing it, we're essentially stopping any of the degradation. So we get it out of the fields, we wash it, and within just a couple hours, it's frozen. And it stays frozen until we're ready to turn it into powder. And essentially, when we turn it into powder, we're removing all of the water, most of the water. And the water and oxygen are the two things that create the degradation, mostly the water. So once we freeze it, we're freezing that water in situ, so it's not able to be activated. And then as soon as it's thawed, we dry it. So we're again removing the water so that it is stable once again. So the nutrients in the produce that we have in our capsules and in our shakes are actually more nutrient dense than the same type of produce that you would find in a grocery store. And that's one of the special things about Juice Plus, is that we're able to really create the most highly nutrient dense powders because we take the time to ensure that the produce is nutrient dense, that the soil has the right nutrients to create that, and that we are locking in that nutrition within hours of picking and then locking it in again as soon as we dry it. And that really, to me, is what is so special about our products. So I think that gives you kind of a very brief kind of story around why I love what I do, and also why I think that the Juice Plus products are really second to none when it comes to nutrition, because we're really focused on every single step of the supply chain, ensuring the safety, the quality, and the nutritional content of our powders from the fields all the way to your door. So I think we may have some time now for some questions. I don't know if people want to unmute or write them in chats, or should we do chats?
Whichever way works better for them, that'll be fine. And let me check Facebook to see if we've got any questions there.
Awesome. So Amanda, yeah, if you could help me be the finder of the questions.
Right.
So anybody in here have did I do that good a job of explaining it, that there are no questions? That can't be true.
You did amazing. Okay. So we do have a question. It says, how many different growers or farms do we use?
That's a great question. So around the world, and let me explain that for the US product, about 85% of the farms that we use to make the US product are in the US and Canada. And in Europe, about 65% of the farms that we use to make our European product are in Europe. So we try and keep as local as possible for our regions, because it makes the most sense from an environmental perspective. It also makes the most sense from a growing perspective. So I think that's really important to note. And right now we're working with about 140 farms around the world that we contract with to make our products. So we also work with different regions within the United States for the same crop, so that, for example, if there's a drought in California, we also get carrots that we got in California in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So that if there's a drought there, then we can pick up the crop in the Midwest. So that's a really good way to manage that as well. But that leaves a lot of farms. And we also, just a note, we do work with really small to medium-sized family farms. So these are farmers that are really kind of keeping it in the family. As I mentioned, these are second, third, seventh generation farmers. So we're really trying to support that family farm as much as we can.
That's amazing. I love that we support family farms.
Yeah. So one of the questions I see here is, do we remove the sugar and salt when we make the powders? No, we actually don't. So people have asked this. There's been a lot of kind of conversations from way back when. There was some miscommunications, I think, back in the day. If we were to remove the sugar and the salt from the produce, it would have to go through a lot of chemical processes to do that. So we don't do that. We just remove the water. Now, both sugar and salt are water soluble. So as we remove the water, some of the sugar and some of the salt will get removed as well, but we don't separately remove all of it. That's not our goal. And one of the reasons that the amount of sugar on the label, on our capsule labels, for example, is so low is because if you think about it, even the most sugary produce, so you say like an apple or berries, which have a lot higher sugar content, they're still only about 30% sugar. And that's at the maximum. So if you take a capsule, or a serving size of capsules, which is about 1.5 grams times 30%, that's really not that much at all. So you have less than 450 milligrams of sugar in a serving. And because we are a food label, they don't allow you to label sugar. It's 0 until it reaches over 0.5 grams, and we're under that. So that's why it's 0 grams of sugar. And same thing with salt. There's even less salt in produce. So the next question, do we freeze dry it? We actually do freeze dry some of the produce. Some of the produce goes through a drum drying process, which is a little bit different. So we have different processes for different produce, really based on what is best for the integrity of the nutrients within the produce. So some produce does better being freeze dried because we can use less excipients. So if it has a higher sugar content, oftentimes we will freeze dry it. But for all things, we freeze it first. Individual quick freezing, which is what locks in the nutrients. And then separately, we dry it. So they're kind of two separate pieces there. Does any of the produce come from the Tower Garden farmers? While we would love to have some of the produce come from Tower Gardens, it's just a very complex process. So really the challenge that we've had, and we have really investigated this with some of our manufacturers, some of our drying manufacturers as well, because they were interested in looking at this as well. But one of the challenges is that it's the produce that grows really good on towers are green. So for example, like kale grows incredibly well on towers. And we do use a lot of kale in our capsules. So that would be great. The problem is that when it comes to harvest, it's a much more intensive process to harvest a tower than it is to harvest from the ground. Expensive. So it's hopefully you heard most of that, but so it becomes a little too expensive to be able to really do efficiently right now, but we are working to see if we can improve that. And the fiber on the label is low for the same exact reason as the sugar content is low. It's because, while there is fiber in produce, it's around the same amount or a little bit less than the sugar content in most fruits. So that it's the same exact story. There is fiber in there. It's just not enough to be able to be a meaningful amount in your diet. So because of the food labels, it's not on there. And the corn in the gummies. So it's actually not corn in the gummies. It is it's a fiber from corn that's in the gummies. So it is a prebiotic fiber. It's called Fibersol, and it's non-GMO, and it is actually incredibly beneficial for gut microbacteria. So the gummy process requires us to have something called bulking ingredients. And for most gummy manufacturing, that's either going to be sugar or a sugar substitute or fiber or something like that. We didn't want to include only sugar. So we also, because fiber is such a challenge for kids to get, we wanted to include that in the gummies as well. So there's a technical reason for it being there. It's part of the bulking piece. So that we could reduce the sugar a bit. But it also provides that prebiotic fiber, and prebiotic means that it's feeding the healthy gut microflora, so that all of those bugs in your intestines that you hear about that are good, that are really good, that you want to keep actively good, it feeds them the stuff that they need so that they can stay healthy and active. And especially for kids who aren't eating as much fiber-rich foods or fruits and vegetables on their own, it can be an incredibly good benefit to their diet. And yes, so the Fibersol in the soft chewables, in the gummies, is a very similar ingredient to the fructooligosaccharides, which are incomplete. They are both basically plant fibers. Both are prebiotic fibers. The Nutrifl is the fructooligosaccharides in the complete, comes from sugar source, and the Fibersol comes from corn. The process is slightly different, but ultimately it does very, very similar things in the body. So I think those were the questions, unless there's anything else from Facebook, Amanda?
Nothing from Facebook, but Viv has his hand up.
Okay.
Hey, Liza. Good to see you again. I don't know if you remember, we met in St. Louis. You gave me a Clemson bracelet to give my friend who was buying a tower garden. So anyway, thank you for that. I'm also a chemical engineer, so I love the family background and everything you talked about. I have a couple of quick questions. That's why I wanted to go on audio rather than type it out on my walk too. So anyway, the first part is, I know Mitras talked a lot about the microbiome in the gut. I've been reading a lot more about the microbiome and the soil, how that helps, how industrial farming practices get away from that. There's a lot of new research, and most of it saying go back to the old ways. So what are we doing in terms of keeping up with it? Are we changing any practices based on new research that's coming out?
Absolutely. So yeah, that is one of the things that we've worked with these family farmers on is, sometimes new ways of doing things may have benefits, but then you lose some of the nutrition. And so we work with them to ensure that as they go through the processes, that they are not doing anything, not making any changes, not upgrading anything that's going to create challenges. And we do look at the microbiome in the soil. That is absolutely one of the things that we look at. That's one of the reasons that we connected them to universities in their area, so that the universities could test the soil for nutrients, but also the microbiome, because that is something that you can add into the soil. And compost and manure are also amazing ways to add to that microbiome. So they concentrate on making sure that they're treating the compost and the manure appropriately so that it's not growing bad bacteria, but that there is still some of the good bacteria left to add back into the soil. It's a really, it's a balancing act that is a bit challenging, but as an engineer, you know it's possible.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you for that. A really, really amazing answer. The second part to it, and it's not directly your field of expertise, but since you mentioned something with a tower, I thought I'd throw it out. I have 2 tower gardens. The produce is amazingly tasty, and I know the studies done in the state of the University of Mississippi say as nutritious. The argument I'm getting from people is, you know, you need a microbiome and soil to be nutritious for the plants to have nutrition, because it's the microbiota that harvests all the nutrients for the plants to absorb. There's nothing like that in the tower garden. What are your thoughts on that?
That is kind of a conundrum. And I think that there's easily some ways that you can kind of balance that. So there are some things that you can kind of add to both of the plants, or you can just create a better microbiome outside of that. So there's really 3 types of probiotics. There's probiotics that come from the soil. There's the probiotics like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria that are non-spore forming. We call them I think of them as like transient probiotics. And then there are spore forming probiotics that are ones that kind of create themselves over and over. So you want to look at how you can kind of balance that and seeing if there is ways that you can increase your microbiota from soil. A lot of times what people have been seeing in some of the newer research is really just putting your feet in the soil can help you, because your skin is really one of the biggest organs in your body. And so creating that positive microbiome on your skin does actually help, so that you know, you don't need to necessarily take it in. One of the things that they've seen is that when the microbiome in the soil is important for the entire kind of macro organism that is the soil. But when you get to the produce, it's less important because it essentially gets washed off. So really it's more important if you're actually eating the dirt, which I do regularly. I don't know if anybody thinks that that's weird. I do not clean all of my produce because I think that a little dirt is healthy. So I was I was raised that way, so I still eat dirt. So yeah, I think you can balance it for sure. And I think that the benefits of the kind of less space required and less water required in the tower garden really make it a huge benefit for most people.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think that's all the questions that we have had. So excited that you joined us, and such great information. I definitely enjoy being out in the dirt and playing outside as much as possible, and love living the ranching side of production. But I love that we support farmers and that we really work and research behind Juice Plus. It's just an amazing company, and I appreciate you jumping on to share that side of things with us.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to. I'm glad all of you joined. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, if you guys ever have any questions, you know, we're always here to help answer them.
Thank you. We sure appreciate it. And we have recorded this call. So if there's people that you need to share it with, if you hopped on late, reach out to Feather Bethany or myself on Facebook. I'm Dunlap-Bridge Amanda. But you could reach out to either one of us and we can get you the recording. And we just thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and talking with us. And we thank you guys for joining us. And we look forward to more educational events, just so that we can all learn more about this amazing company and share it with others and this amazing product. And we're just so excited to have you all here. So thank you and have a great evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.